U.S. President Joe Biden reiterated Washington's solidarity with Israel as he wrapped up his day-long visit to Tel Aviv. Biden pledged to do everything in his power to ensure that Israel remains a safe place for Jewish people. Biden's visit once again underlined America's ironclad support for the country, even as it remained the only stop of his Middle East mission.
I come to Israel with a single message. You're not alone. You are not alone. As long as the United States stands, and we will stand forever, we'll not let you ever be alone. It may not feel that way today. Israel must again be a safe place for the Jewish people. And I promise you, we're going to do everything in our power to make sure that it will be.
Biden's historic visit is the first trip to Israel by an American president at a time of war. It became a diplomatic scramble for Biden to prevent the war from spiraling into a larger conflict. The challenge has become more formidable as outrage swept through West Asia following a rocket missile explosion that claimed hundreds of lives at the Al-Ali hospital in the Gaza Strip. During his joint address with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, Biden said the hospital blast appeared to have been caused by the other team and not Israel. Netanyahu also held Hamas responsible for the explosion.
We saw the cost of this terrible war crime yesterday when a rocket fired by a Palestinian terrorist misfired and landed on a Palestinian hospital. The entire world was rightfully outraged, but this outrage should be directed not in Israel, but at the terrorists.
Thanking Biden for support and moral clarity, Netanyahu stated that Israel will defeat Hamas and forces of civilization will prevail. The escalating tensions in West Asia have put the spotlight on the U.S. trying to dial down the conflict. The American president employed his visit to emphasize that Hamas does not represent all Palestinian people, even as he offered robust support to Israel. Biden renewed commitment to the elusive goal of creating a Palestinian state. Biden said the crisis strengthens determination for a two-state solution. He added that Israel has agreed to allow aid into the impoverished Gaza Strip, even as it wages a military campaign in response to Hamas attacks. Saying he is saddened by the loss of lives in the region, the American president called for justice before departing from Tel Aviv.
A support that reflects the overwhelming will of the American people. I've seen your support every day in the depth and breadth of cooperation that we have had since the beginning of this war. A level of cooperation that is
So the United States President Joe Biden is about to leave Tel Aviv in Israel. The White House says that it was a successful mission by the United States President. Now let's just talk about this and talk more about this. And we earlier spoke to Heino Klink from Washington, D.C. He's the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for East Asia, and this is what he had to say.
I would say that the president's trip into the region was high risk from the very beginning, not just obviously from a physical and security perspective, since he's traveling into a war zone, but also from a diplomatic and a political perspective. The strike on the tragic strike on the hospital in Gaza, it certainly bears the world condemnation. And it is unfortunate that that, in fact, caused America's Arab partners, particularly the Jordanians and the Egyptians, to walk away from the summit that King Abdullah was going to host in Amman. I believe that for a longer-term solution, the Arab states, the neighboring Arab states, need to be involved. It's, again, very unfortunate, both due to the large loss of civilian life at the hospital, as well as, again, from a diplomatic perspective, that meeting was canceled. And I'm sure that then reduced, obviously, the scope of what the president will be able to accomplish during his time in the region.
Susan Teherani is our correspondent, and she's now joining us live from New York. And Professor Yuri Bar-Joseph is a professor of political science at the University of Haifa. He's joining us from Tel Aviv, Israel. Thank you both for joining us at this hour. Susan, I will start with you. President Joe Biden has completed his trip to Israel, but he did encounter some setback. The Jordan trip, where he was supposed to meet the Jordanian king, Egyptian president, and President Mahmoud Abbas, was cancelled. Has the White House reacted to this, and what are they saying?
Well, the White House, immediately after it was canceled, Eric, you may recall, put out a statement saying that it was an agreement between the two sides because of those 3 days of mourning due to that attack on that hospital in Gaza. The United States, President Biden in particular, while he was in Israel, did point to the fact that he's been talking to Arab allies behind closed doors in the region to help secure the release of hostages held by Hamas. So while there are back-channel negotiations, there's no doubt that this was somewhat a missed opportunity for those leaders to meet with President Biden, and the scope of his trip was marginalized. But we did learn that the Israelis have now agreed, Benjamin Netanyahu's office put out a statement, they've agreed to open the Rafah crossing from Egypt for humanitarian aid, food, water, and medicine, under the condition it doesn't go in the hands of Hamas. President Biden said under the condition that Hamas doesn't steal them again, as we had heard from UN agencies. And we also heard that President Biden really wanted to get an understanding of this possible ground offensive against Gaza by the Israelis. First and foremost, it was reported that it was to prevent a spillover to other regions. Now some analysts are saying he wanted that understanding at this point to see what can be done and what can be managed should it be spilled over.
Susan, stay with me. Professor Yuri, welcome to WION World is One. In your view, do you think Biden's mission was successful, and what should we expect to see in the coming days after his trip?
Well, it was successful, first of all, because he came and he left and nothing dramatic happened. But I think that was already said, the tragic incident in El Ali hospital yesterday prevented him from getting or gaining some more achievements. I'm sure that there will be a continuation of diplomatic talks even in the coming days, and I think that his first mission is to make sure that, first of all, this conflict doesn't escalate to a major war between Israel, Hezbollah, and Iran and its proxies.
Right.
And then he wants to de-escalate as much as possible the conflict between Israel and the Hamas in Gaza, primarily to pressure Israel to avoid a major ground offensive.
Professor, stay with me. Susan, the president was stern and steadfast with stating America's support to Israel, but he was also cautious and said, quote, "While you are filled with rage, do not be consumed by it," saying the plight of innocent Gazans should be put into account. What are Americans back home saying about Biden's trip to Israel?
Here at home, because of domestic politics, it's a mixed bag of opinion. While the majority of American people support Israelis, they support America's unwavering support for Israel. The question that some are asking is if President Biden, from a domestic standpoint, would have better served as perhaps making these achievements from Camp David as opposed to taking this trip all the way to Israel. However, that being said, it's clear that Americans, again, want to know what will happen to these hostages being held captive by Hamas. Remember, Americans are part of those hostages, as we know so far, and perhaps the president being there and demonstrating that he is doing something is something that, was welcomed. It was a noble cause nonetheless. But again, that meeting that was canceled with Arab leaders, no matter how you look at it, it wasn't a good look for the U.S. president. I mean, it's not every day when leaders decide that it's, not a good idea to meet with the U.S. president.
All right, Professor Yuri, in your view, is there another way Israel can eliminate the Hamas militant group without in any way harming or even affecting civilians who, despite the warning to leave, have nowhere to go, having in mind that there are hospitals still in operation with hundreds of patients, and even leaving Gaza for them is not an option?
This is a very, very difficult situation for Israel. On the one hand, the Israelis demand that Hamas will pay the price for the atrocities the organization conducted. On the other hand, the main the main military option now, invading Gaza, means huge battles in highly populated regions. Gaza is 365 square kilometers with over 2 million inhabitants. It's obvious that the Hamas doesn't want the civilians to live because it needs the civilians as a human shield for its men, and whatever Israel does, it won't get easy out of this difficult situation. In my personal view, and I don't know if this is the view of the generals as well, the way to do it is to enter into a low intensity conflict with Hamas, that is to target its leaders, to target every military installation it has, rockets, etc., but not invade Gaza, because this might be a huge distraction for the civilian population of Gaza.
Thank you very much for saying that. Professor Yuri Bar Joseph is a professor of political science at the University of Haifa, and Susan Teherani is our correspondent in New York. Thank you both for talking to us today.
Thank you.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.